we have a piecewise function here, and that's what all of this kind of looks like here. It's different graphs at different locations. We're asked to find the domain and the range, and this one can be a challenge. The most challenging part of this one is going to be actually graphing it. And so we need to do that first. And I've got kind of three different graphs. I've got x plus 1 as this one, then I've got 3, which is just a horizontal line, then this one that's x squared, that's our quadratic. So we need to kind of envision what these three graphs look like. I'm going to graph them for you over here on the side. This is just the x plus 1 graph. Okay, this is what it would look like if we did the entire graph with it. 3 would just look like this. It'd just be a horizontal line right there. And then x squared would be a quadratic right here. Now, the difference is right here is kind of these are kind of our rules. If x is less than -2, so that means if it's anything over on this side, it's going to be this graph, x plus 1. It's going to look like this. But then kind of in the middle of the graph, if you will, it's going to look like a horizontal line right at 3. And then on the right-hand side, it's going to look like x squared. Okay, so let's kind of start by, I like to start this by sectioning off the graph. So I've got one at -2 here. So I draw a vertical line right here at -2. And this just kind of helps me. This is not part of the graph. However, it helps me to kind of divide up these three graphs. Then I know anything on this side, the left side of the blue line here, is going to be my graph x plus 1. Then looks like I have another one right here at 1. So I'm going to draw one right there at 1. Then I know anything in between here is going to be my 3. And finally, anything on the right-hand side of this blue line is going to be my x squared. Okay, so if I were to draw this graph, x plus 1, it would go right down, right straight through here. But I'm not going to draw it all the way through this blue line because it says it's only on everything on the left-hand side of the blue line. So I only draw it on the left-hand side of the blue line. But if you can envision this, it would continue on. It would intersect right at +1 and continue on. However, this only applies to everything less than -2, so I'm just going to leave it there. Next one is our middle one, and that's just plain old 3. That means it's going to be a horizontal line right here at 3. So I draw that one right across at 3, just right in between there. It doesn't go on the left side or the right side, just right in between. Finally, I have x squared, and if you can envision x squared comes down kind of like this, goes through, bounces back up, goes back up here. Okay, so this is what we're going to be doing. We're only going to see what's on the right-hand side here. So we're going to see a big curve right along here. All right, so let's bring that one in. There's our curve. And this one does have an arrow. It does continue on, as well as this one down here has an arrow. This one doesn't because it stops. Okay, now we need to look here. All right, we've got the hard part done. Now we need to just kind of look at this one. This says x is less than -2 on this first one. That means -2 is not included in this graph. So this graph here is not included with -2. So when we put a circle on this one, it's going to be an open circle indicating -2 is not included in this data set. Okay, if you look at this middle graph here, this 3, it says -2 is indeed included. Okay, -2 is less than or equal to, so that means it's going to be included. So we're going to put a closed dot there. However, on the right-hand side over here with 1, it's not included. X is less than 1, so we'll use an open circle here and a closed circle on the bottom one here, indicating that x is greater than or equal to 1 for our x squared. Okay, so we can't have two closed circles here because if x were to equal 1, it can't equal two different things here. So you'll notice that sometimes you will see it where they're both open circles, but you'll never see two closed circles here. All right, well, we've got this graphed. Okay, and that was kind of the hard part. Now that we have it graphed, let's talk about domain and range here. I'm going to move it over to the side just so we can talk about it. I lose my blue lines because those are not actually a part of the graph, but here's what your actual graph would look like. Remember, the domain are all of the x values. So as we go across here, all of these that are x values would be a part of our domain. And the way that I do that one is I bring a pen in or something that's just a straight line that I can just drag across. And if you'll see here, my x values, my horizontal ones, it's intersecting right here. In fact, it's intersecting way over here too. I can go off the page, if you will, because it's got an arrow and it will still intersect. Then I just drag it across all of my x values. It's intersecting everywhere, all the way across here. In fact, even right here at -2, it's intersecting. Well, it's not intersecting here. It is intersecting up here. Same thing at 1. It's not intersecting here, but it is intersecting down here. Now over here, it doesn't look like it's intersecting. However, notice we have an arrow on this. That means it's going up, and it's continuing up, and it's continuing up as we go way over here. And we would have to go way off the page up here, but it would intersect there as well. So all my domain are all values for x, which would be negative infinity to positive infinity. Remember, with infinity, we're using parentheses. And the comma here, this is not a coordinate or an ordered pair. This is a value, a domain. In other words, it goes from negative infinity to positive infinity, and it covers all of those values. Okay, now let's bring in range. When we're talking about our range, we're talking about all of our y values. So let's look here. I do the same thing. I just drag it up. It's intersecting right here. You can see this arrow indicates that it continues on. So it's intersecting right here, intersecting all the way along here, right up until the point where I get right here. And this is, let's see, that's at -1. It's got an open circle indicating it does not intersect at -1. So I kind of start there. It goes negative infinity, comma, -1, and it stops at -1. Now, -1 is not included, so we would use a parenthesis, not a bracket. Okay, now then from -1, I can continue on with my line. I'll drag it up, and nothing in between there is included until we hit, looks like +1. Now, we know it's going to intersect something else again, so we use this symbol. It kind of looks like a U, basically. And then we start again at +1, and +1 is included, so we're not going to use a parenthesis, we're going to use a bracket. And then from there, we drag it across, and it intersects all of these, all the way through here. And when it intersects all of those, it goes all the way up to infinity. And infinity, we use brackets. So there are three main things that we need to be aware of here. It includes all my y values all the way up to -1. Then it stops, and it stops all the way up until we hit +1. And so if we use infinity, we're always going to use parentheses. If the number is included, we're going to use these brackets. Just like right here, +1 was included, so I used a bracket. However, -1 is not included, so I use parentheses on it. So that's kind of your three rules here that you can use to kind of help you when you're formatting this domain and range.